Welcome, everybody, to April. Happy spring. Hopefully, you are well on your way to feeling this emergence of spring. We've been talking a lot about emergence in the last month, engaging in practices about prepping for growth. How do we just break the surface, figuring out where we are, what we want, getting focused on that. And this month, we're going to zone that in a little bit. We're going to focus on growth itself, where we're putting our energy, our attention, and noticing how that influences the outcome, fixation on the outcome. And we're all going to get into some of the content, some of neuroscience, but we're going to make it relatable, I promise. And we're going to talk about some of the practices that you'll be engaging in and why that might be helpful in helping you grow. So again, I'm Patrick Bryant. I'm here with Amanda Birch and Megan Bryant, and let's get going. So the major theme that we're going to present to you today, and hopefully you gain something from and can relate to, is where you put your energy. So does anybody want to chime in on what does that have to do with growth?
Well, I think the where you're putting your energy is really a powerful tool. I really think because it's like where I'm sure we've all heard this. It's like where your attention goes, your energy flows. So if you're focused on your path of growth or a goal or a way that you want to feel, and you put your energy towards that, that's what's going to happen for you. So like you start behaving in a way and thinking in a way that allows you to move towards that goal if you're putting your energy into it.
Yeah, so like in the brain, it registers the content, the subject, right? It doesn't, if you're saying, I don't want this, our brain isn't necessarily registering the don't part of that. It's focusing on this. So you can imagine how that might be problematic if you are really stuck in or really hyper focused on, um, you know, I don't want to feel awful at my job. Well, there's not much else for the brain to focus on other than awful at your job. So we have
Mhm.
to get a little more specific.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that our brain is wired to focus on the negative, to notice that more. There's an analogy of that negative experiences are like Velcro to our brain, and then positive experiences are like Teflon. So if we think of the negative experience coming in, our brain's like, yes, I need to grab onto that. I need to learn, right? Survival of we need to take the negative, we need to learn from it, we need to adapt. And the positive experiences are like, oh, that's nice, but just kind of roll off like that Teflon. So I think, yeah, just it maybe normalizing that like that's how our brains work. It's not that like you're a negative person or you're doing something wrong in how you're thinking, but it's natural that we just kind of stick to those negative things more. So our compass, our attention may be going more toward negativity or kind of those, it's easier to pinpoint the things we don't want, right? I don't want work to be stressful. I don't want to feel pain. I don't want these things. But our brain literally doesn't hear the disqualifying statement, right? So it's like, I don't want to be sick. It just hears sick. And we're reinforcing that message within our brain and body. So I think that it's not easy to think in all positive language because if we're like, well, we know what we mean when we say I don't want to be sick, right? It means I want to be healthy. But if we can actually change that language for ourselves to I want to be healthy, it feels so different in the body and it registers literally different in our brain. So I think that's maybe a challenge this month or just kind of in your own growth process of how to kind of reshift the wording that we use and how we talk with ourselves of you'll notice it. You'll know it's hard to do because we
Well,
just
at the
naturally.
very least, what it does is it prompts us to think about what does healthy look like.
Mhm.
We
Right.
know
Yeah.
what sick feels like. We want to focus on what healthy feels like and what it looks like. And that's how we come up with the roadmap for healthy.
And I wonder if that's especially hard when we talk about stress. If like, what does not stress look like? Right? Like the opposite of sick is healthy, right? But what's the opposite of stress? Like that's very different depending on who you
And do
talk.
we have to avoid stress?
Do we?
No. Kathy McConnell says we don't. she's telling us about the upside of stress and that part of our stress is being stressed about being stressed. Her research is showing that mortality and sickness is actually more tied to people's perception of being stressed than the stress itself. So basically, if you believe the stress will kill you, you're more likely to die from it
Mm.
because you're focused on the stress
Mm.
rather than doing something else.
So then there's that would be considered maybe bad stress. Is but you're saying there's good stress too.
There's good stress, and it's Kelly McConigal. Sorry, I said her first name wrong. There's good stress, so it motivates us to act. You know, actors and performers talk about it all the time. If they're just laissez-faire about their performance, it tends to show in what's happening. The anxiety, the stress motivates them to show up,
Mm.
but not to the degree of feeling threatened by it. So,
Mm.
you know, maybe you've had to take a test before in your lifetime. If you are feeling threatened by the test, then it's going to inhibit you. You're going to walk in there with a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol. Those are the people you see like hungover and shaking their leg and fidgeting and doing all the things because they're stressed out about getting a specific outcome versus the healthy amount of stress motivates you to actually study, to actually prepare, and not be like, I'll show up and see what happens.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. So now I'm putting kind of two and two together. And when I work with older people on their physical balance, and they just their mentality is that their balance is bad, that they're bad at balancing. So like they have this thought process. It's in that negativity bias of like, I am not good at this, and they're motivated to learn because they want to be healthy, and healthy looks like being not falling. So when I work with them, I encourage them to be a little bit more playful and to shift their perception to kind of working with balance as if it's like a fun thing and kind of like something that they can do on a daily basis within their home, within their everyday life, and bring in a little element of like, it's not so serious, but you can do this kind of fun movement. And we start to play with balancing versus like, I'm I'm not good at balance to like I can play with balance. And that is really, really magnificent shift I see in them just going from like their first like balancing on one side and they're just like huffing and puffing to where I'm like, just let it go. Like let's have some fun. And then the next side they're like laughing and having fun and they're balancing.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
that
and
makes me,
what a lovely way to grow, right? To do that growth process of seeing it as playful, as fun, and not like I have to achieve this outcome and I feel like I can't. Therefore, right? If we shift our thinking to I can't, more likely to your point, Patrick, with the stress of like, well, then I can't. But if it's like, let's just see what happens, if we add in that curiosity, if we add in that kind of playfulness, experiential aspect, then we're more likely to be able to grow or right or accomplish that
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah, and it shifts them from like worrying about falling to just like having being alive, just being a human learning.
well, there's
Right,
an
because if we're
acceptance
focused
that
on
you're,
I'm gonna fall, then you're probably gonna fall.
well, there's an acceptance that you're going to fall.
Hmm.
It's okay to fall. Like, I mean, it's kind of what we see now in pop culture is the cancel culture, right? That everybody talks about. There's not much room to make a mistake because whatever mistake you make is now permanently ingrained in your public identity. So people are walking around very stressed and anxious and scared rather than, eek, that was a mistake. Let me learn from it and gather information because the information lives in the experience,
Yeah.
not in the war gamed, which is a term for like trying to plan out all possible scenarios without having any actual experience or information about the thing you're engaging in.
Mm.
So when we talk about growth, we're kind of getting into the barriers, the problems that we see around it, why, you know, it's important for us to talk about this. So, you know, there's good stress, there's well, good stress, there's healthy stress, there's unhealthy stress. Um, there's what we think we can handle or tolerate. Anybody want to talk about that?
So again, I'm as a yoga teacher and yoga therapist, I talk a lot about like in the body, but the body is the instrument of the mind, so we can use these together. Um, when I talk about in my classes with my students, I talk about a lot how the brain is immediately going to kind of grab onto what feels uncomfortable or where there's discomfort in the body, right? And so I encourage them to stay with that and to allow that to be present. And then we move into shifting our perspective, shifting our awareness and our energy, pointing towards what feels okay, what feels supported, what feels grounded, what feels relaxed, whatever sensation you can find that doesn't feel uncomfortable, right? So finding that support and then being able to hold both. So bringing in that discomfort, allowing it to be there because it's information. It's not a good or bad thing that you did. It's not a mistake. It's just information. And then also feeling supported in that as information as well. So there's no avoiding either or an extreme like attachment to either.
Mm.
That is allowing you to create more space around your present experience and widen your window of tolerance to be with the discomfort and to be with comfort at the same time. So I appreciate that in the body sense, but also it translates to being able to like being uncomfortable in our mental capacities and in our emotional or our work life or our family life, whatever might come up for you.
Mm. Yeah, and Amanda, I love your point of not putting the label on it, right? It's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just information. So
Mm.
kind of from that, um, like you're doing an experiment, right? Like you're a scientist. Like, did this work? Did this not work? What do I want to do next? Rather than like, oh, I failed or this was bad. I just love that kind of taking that mentality to growth of, I'm yeah, I love that. And I think it's Dan Siegel, is that right? Who like did the window tolerance, kind of the official window tolerance.
Mhm.
So yeah, that like part in the middle that is our window, which everyone has a different size window. Some are very small, some are bigger. Of just kind of like what can we tolerate, right? Where does that kind of feel comfy, that comfort zone? And then outside of that, when we get pushed out of something like, ooh, this is challenging, right? I'm doing this new yoga pose, or I'm trying this new thing, or I'm learning something. And like, we have those little signals of like, this does not feel good. Um, the idea of kind of like, can we cope? Can we tolerate? Or can we kind of bring ourselves back into that window of like, okay, this experience is still safe. This is still good. This is still okay. If we get pushed too far out, maybe there's whatever experience is just is like, pushed out of there. Above, we get into that hypoarousal state, which looks more like anger. It's like, like I can't do this, some maybe negative thinking there. And then below, it looks more like it's hypoarousal. So we just kind of shut down. I think this day and age, we're all really good at that, where we kind of like, that's more like we're in our phones, or I'm binge watching, or I need to sleep, or I'm just like, I'm avoiding things. So either one is showing dysregulation, right? And so ideally we want to learn ways and have ways to kind of help kind of come back into that window, right? Or like you said, Amanda, that hold that space between like I'm uncomfortable, but I'm still okay. I'm not kind of so dysregulated out here. Um, and Kathy Melchiotti is big in the art therapy world, and she does a lot with trauma and expressive art therapy now in her career. But she kind of took that and has shifted it to the circle of capacity. So mainly a big language shift, right? Instead of what are we tolerating, to what do we have the capacity for? And our capacity can change day to day, week to week. Of course, we all have different levels of capacity. But she mainly shifted that because of her work with veterans and trauma survivors, or where tolerance just kind of had the connotation of like, I've already tolerated so much, right? There's already been so much I'm tolerating. It's more about thriving rather than like tolerating. So I actually pulled it up because I wanted to get her language right around. So she has the circle of capacity in the middle, and then kind of flowing out of that, we're wanting to expand a person's ability to experience joy, resilience, and empowerment rather than just kind of tolerating. So it's not just about coping skills, which in the therapy world, right, we love coping skills, but of how do we kind of increase that joy, that curiosity, those things that we're really doing here on the path, right? Of how do we cultivate that as a way to kind of expand our growth.
Sounds like this is it's drawing attention to the fact that capacity is subjective, allowing us to just embrace that, right? Because the other thing tolerance implies is that we're stuck in it.
Mm.
We're
Mm.
just here. I think that's what I took from what you said of I've been tolerating this for a long time. People get tired of tolerating. They
Mm.
want to, that's what we're talking about is growth. And then the
Mm.
opposite end of that spectrum is hyperfixation on growth, always growing.
Mm.
How many clients have you all worked with who come in super stressed, super overwhelmed, super fatigued, and they don't understand because they have read every book, listened to every podcast about growth, and they're constantly growing and taking care of themselves. They're not. They're overwhelming themselves. The body's releasing cortisol and adrenaline, and they're just go, 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 which interrupts the sleep cycles, which also creates a lot of shame narratives and perfectionism, actually.
I was gonna say if there's something underneath that that's like you're there's a lot of pressure to do, but you don't give yourself enough time to just kind of like be. And so that it feels like that kind of like shift of like you're overwhelmed because you're putting so much of your attention on this that you forgot you have a life to enjoy, not just like
Mm.
this path of growth, you also have the present moment, which is allowing yourself to be. I love this, like you're a human being, not a human doing. So it's important to take those times. We talked about last month, like noticing the glimmers and seeking on inspiration from this like brand new bright season. And I find it in nature all the time, but you can see it in other places in the world, like or in other places in your communities. So I think that that piece is really important to what does not stressed feel like. It's being okay in that moment where you're just noticing like the lizards coming out or the tulips blooming or whatever your thing is just allowing yourself to be in that moment. That's for me personally, I think for a lot of other people, that's what not stressed feels like.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that's part. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just thinking that the like doing the growth, right? I'm always bettering myself. I'm always doing like we're kind of constantly shifting our compass, our awareness to like the future or like the next
Mhm.
thing and
Right.
not taking a moment to be like, okay, but where am I now? And can some of that be okay? Not that it's bad to want to grow or to like,
Mm.
develop something, but like you said, Patrick, that zooming in and out of like, okay, here's where I want to go, but here's where I am now. How can I be now and also still attune my compass or whatnot, to where I want to go?
Mm.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of why mindfulness has been so effective in, the treatment of depression is, and anyone who's experienced depression, particularly, major depressive disorder to where it's chronic, waiting around to feel motivated to do something, it's not going to happen. That's part of depression. And so that's what we do is we bring people into the moment and, bringing back what we were talking about earlier in this conversation of, focusing on what you don't want. It can be a great marker to start from. Well, I know what I don't want. My brain's going to be stuck there and focused on that. I don't want to feel depressed. Well, I already am feeling depressed. So let me just acknowledge that, embrace that's where my brain went, and then start to develop something like practice something. Just go do something that's approachable and accessible, and then figure out what that's like. And that's where the growth happens, not fantasizing. It's okay to fantasize about some future version of you that's not depressed. But what does that look like? What does a not depressed or not stressed or not anxious you look like? And then come back into your current moment and be like, okay, well, what's one thing I can go do? And I think accepting the steps toward that versus miraculously being there, which is what keeps people stuck because it's too overwhelming, it's too big. You can't eat an entire cow, right?
You can
Little
one bite at a
pieces.
time.
Well, there you go. There you go. You got to chop that thing up.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we talked about last month, right? Like the next step, the next thing. We may have, yeah, that larger goal, but okay, like right now, it's a matter of I'm gonna put my feet on the floor and walk to the shower. I'm gonna turn on the water. You know what I mean? Like it's one little thing at a time. There's something I can't remember the same, but it's something about like if your goal feels too big, your next step is to, I don't know, something about reevaluating the next step. Like if it feels too overwhelming, then like your next step is too big. So like make it smaller. Um, and I think giving yourself permission that that's okay to do of, maybe you have your goal out here, but like, shoot, maybe I need to bring it closer, and kind of it helps when we when we achieve our goals. It feels good, right? When we get to that next growth thing. So shifting that expectation for yourself or kind of shifting that down, if my goal is to run a 5-minute mile, okay, well, I need to walk a mile first. Like kind of shifting that down.
So is celebrating the wins part of growth?
I think so.
Absolutely.
Keeps the motivation going.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can get that motivation from that like, future image of yourself of what you want your life to look like, but also acknowledging how you want to feel and what you do feel. So like you can use that as a kind of a marker to encourage yourself if you're um, I think with depression, there's a lot of like stuckness. It's a lot of like heaviness, and so it's hard to take that next step, right? So, what do you want to feel like just for the next like 5 minutes? Maybe that's yeah, putting your feet on the ground and walking to the shower and turning it on, and then
Mm.
getting in, right? And it's just that one little tiny step at a time. And it's things like creating a little bit more space or shifting a little bit of how you're investing your energy. Like, so in the morning, if your first thing is like grab your phone and then you linger in bed for a little bit longer, is there, notice how that feels, first of all. If that's something that you are noticing as a cue that is like kind of keeping your energy in a little bit more of like a heavy state, then you shift towards like this month, we'll be doing a breath practice that is specifically curated to bring in energy. And so in that practice, you could do that for 3 minutes instead of scrolling on your phone for 15 minutes, and you'll feel more than likely feel a lot better than you did before you or when you do sit on your scrolling phone. And that's just like very personal. Like that is my like my growth practice is very much like taking time to like really intentionally get off of the screen, off of the phone and into how I want to feel and committing to that. And that's got to be a priority.
Yeah, I think to your point is also what are you looking at on your phone? Like if you're starting your day looking at all the bad stuff that's happening, your interpretation of bad,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you have now entered the day.
Yes.
And so like, that's what I think that's where the term doom scrolling comes from, right? Is it's clickbait. You click on that or you spend a lot of time hovering on that, and now you're inundated with that subject matter
Mhm.
to start your day or at any part of your day.
And I know
Yeah.
there's like pretty good research about like the first like portion of your day, the first like certain percentage of your day is like the most important for you to do something good for
Mm.
you because it's going to influence the rest of your day. I don't know exactly what those statistics are, but maybe just the morning is trying to figure out a different thing to do. Maybe it's not getting out of bed, but it's not looking at your phone either. Maybe you're just
Sure.
in contemplation. Maybe you're just breathing in bed, right? Or looking at the ceiling.
Or take the apps off, take the news apps and the social
Yeah.
media apps off of your phone so that if you're going to grab your phone, you at least don't have access to that right away. John Kabat-Zinn talks about that in mindfulness-based stress reduction, helping people become aware of what their day feels like when they start their day with a small, approachable mindfulness practice versus when they start their day, how they had been starting their day before doing the MBSR.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking like a lens, right? Like if especially in the morning, like okay, fresh, new. If it's looking through the phone or doing something like we're automatically kind of putting that lens in front of our face of like, and if that's like anything with the news is just filtered toward negativity, right? So if we already like stress and negativity, then we're going to notice that. We're going to see more of that. We're going to breed more of that. We're already attuning our compass like to those things, whether that's intentional or not, right? It might be just like, I want to know what's going on in the world, which is great. However, right, we kind of set ourselves up just to see more of that. And then our brain's like, oh, yeah, look, there it is again. There it is again. There it's again. You're right. Like, we do need to be worried about this. We do need to be scared. Look at that. And then we just grow that within ourselves kind of throughout the day.
That,
Um,
that like
so
hyperfixation is like if you're putting all of your attention on that, that's going to color the your day.
yeah,
Um,
and I think that's unintentionally
yes.
fixated on that, right? I might
Yes.
not go into
Mhm.
be like, I need to find all the scary things in the world today, but I unintentionally kind of absorbed a lot of that. And therefore, because of how our brains work, and it's just kind of, yeah, we
Yeah.
loop into that anxiety spiral, or we kind of our brain's like, yep, I'm going to notice this now because we do need to be worried.
Well, that's the threat. That's the thing that could hurt us or harm us. Evolutionary
Right.
psychology, right? The predator hunting us, the people, the humanoids who were anxious about that and developed awareness skills to avoid that survived. And here we are. The predecessors or the offspring of the most anxious humanoids.
Mhm.
But we don't have that thing coming to haunt us anymore.
Yeah. And I think it's like, yes, it's important to be informed and just take some time to really intentionally create a little space for that and learn what you need to learn, and then do whatever you need to do to take care of your nervous system before you go into your next thing, whatever that is. Um, and I think that is part of the growth process, especially because I mean, it might not be super comfortable to like look at what's going on in the world, right? So we're building some space and tolerance to be with what feels a little bit uncomfortable, a lot uncomfortable, and then creating that other end of it to say, okay, that was uncomfortable, but this feels good. I can look out and see the world is still fine right here in front of me, and I'm going to go back into that world in front of me.
Yeah, I appreciate you noting that because it's not about like, okay, fine, I won't look at the news, right? Or like avoid. But the yes and, right? I can do this and then how do I take care of myself? And I know in March we did the glimmers, which I think like universally, can play in lots of things, but those glimmers of like, okay, these are things that help me regulate, right? These are things that help my brain and body calm. So how do I take care of that? And maybe watch the news and then watch some cute cat videos, or I remind myself of grandma's fresh baked cookies, whatever it is of like, having kind of that little bit of settle, um, to then shift, right? So we're kind of cleaning that lens off, right? Or kind of like giving it a new perspective.
Yeah. So, the practices for this month are specifically tailored to help with noticing your growth, being intentional about the direction that we're focusing our energy, our attention, and building upon that, celebrating the wins along the way, setting realistic milestones. Maybe, maybe it's quite literally putting something on your calendar to prompt you to just reflect. How am I doing? How was I feeling yesterday? How am I feeling today? What do I want tomorrow? Whatever that might look like, be very specific. So in world of psychology, the more generalized or overgeneralized we get, that's where stress and anxiety lives. That's why we funnel down to specifics. That's the zoning in and zoning or zooming in, zooming out is big picture is great, but let me come into like the action. How do I put that in action? Action is right here.
Mm. So I have a little bonus activity thing to share that I like to do with clients. But if you kind of think of like distress for yourself, if there's like we kind of do it on like a 0 to 10 scale. So 0 is like, I'm good, like I'm feeling good, like things are going well. 10 would be whatever you're like, oh my gosh, crisis mode, right? Like this is rough for me, and kind of mapping out for yourself, okay, what do these different levels per se kind of look like? And thinking, like I noticed I start eating more sugar, or I stop going to the gym, or I notice like sleep gets rough. What are some things you kind of notice for yourself, and kind of laying that out on this scale, right? Because everything's on a scale. And then part of that, okay, what do we do for ourselves? So when we notice these certain things drop off, or my sleep's kind of wonky, or I'm avoiding conversations with some people, like, okay, what do I need then? Maybe I need to intentionally reach out to someone. Maybe I need to check in with my goals. Maybe, I need to eat some fruit, whatever it is, right? Of like, what are what are those practical things to do? Because in the time, you can use that kind of a roadmap for yourself or kind of a check-in point of like, okay, like sometimes we just kind of keep tolerating, right? We keep doing, doing, doing until we're like, whoa, like this is harder. So having kind of that check-in point for yourself of like, actually, no, I'm kind of operating at a 6. What do I need to do to take care of myself? It's easier to think about those things when we're calmer than in the moment of I'm at a 6 and feeling all this stuff. Like, what do I do? So that's just kind of can be a nice way to kind of pre-plan for yourself
I
those
like that
emotions.
because it also, for me, it makes me think, do I need to grow right now? Do I need to put a lot of energy or effort or attention into growth? Or am I already growing or have I already grown? Whew. Let me pause and celebrate because, yeah, I like that. You're getting real-time information about how you're feeling, constantly growing,
Yeah, and
constantly.
you only have so much energy, right? So maybe it's okay, energy right now needs to go in caring for sick mother, and it can't go into, something else. Like our attention and energy needs to shift. And so giving yourself that permission of like something can be on hold.
Yeah, so it's like you can recalibrate your compass at any time, right? You can check in with yourself, you can check in with where your energy is, where you've been putting it, if there's other places that need more or less, and just recalibrate where your compass is pointing.
Yeah. All right. Good discussion today. I hope you all pull something away from this. But, the big deal here, the big takeaway is just checking in with yourself. This is the underlying theme of everything we talk about. What mindfulness actually means is paying attention to your present experience, you in the experience. So noticing what do I need, which is based on the facts of the current situation. Stories are helpful to notice. Feelings and fact or thoughts are helpful to notice, but they're not facts. So hopefully we can take that in and engage in our practices this month and um, just pay attention to what growth feels like. Celebrate that. Give yourself a break. That's how we keep going. That's how we'll enter into flow. Just a little foreshadowing for the summer. All right, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.